So we're gonna hop right in and get right into our first guest. And this is someone that I saw posting on Facebook and who has come out with a book. And a couple of years ago, I was really lucky after a meeting of the 102nd Precinct Community Council to get invited over to the 102nd Precinct, and the community affairs officer there at the time took me around and gave me a real good tour of the place, down into where the stables were, upstairs, all around. We'll talk about more about that later into the details. But at one point, when I was just kind of sitting in the room there, and they were very kind to me, and there was a couple officers, and over the next 30, 40 minutes, it was just them telling stories. And a lot of them were, they were funny stories. It was just good. It was just one after the other telling each other stories, and the way they told them was very, very funny. And it was real interesting hearing this stuff. Listen, for an outsider, for a civilian to hear this kind of stuff, it's really interesting, and it's a whole different life, and it's a real good look at the other side. And that's exactly what this book is. You pick up this book, and this book is called Six More Dead by Detective Raymond Berke, who was a native of Woodhaven. And when you read this book, and he talks about it early on, and it really is it's just a great collection of stories, and it centers around two larger stories which the book are framed around. But there are a lot of really interesting stories throughout the book, and it's a terrific read, and I highly recommend that you pick it up. And joining us now is Detective Berke. And Raymond, how are you, sir?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Very, very good. First of all, congratulations. I finished the book. I got the book from Amazon, and really sped through it. And it's a terrific read. And congratulations on getting it published. How does it feel?
Still getting used to it. The autograph parts are getting kind of funny because I've never imagined anything like that. But I got people coming up to me asking, with the book, and that's just a strange feeling for me. But I'm enjoying it.
It's great. Now, how far back can you go and think about when you thought about writing this book?
Oh, probably 30 years ago. I mean, just we'd see stuff every day that nobody ever saw before, and you never heard of, and you'd go through these cases, or just the regular police calls when I was in uniform in a radio car, and you just say, people would never believe this if you told it to them, and if it was on television, they'd laugh. It's realistic, and I just kept saying, one day I got to write a book, and eventually I got convinced to do so. At home at a barbecue, I had all my squad partners here, and we were telling war stories, as everybody does when we get together. And my wife's friends and her business colleagues were on the other side of the deck, so to speak. And one of the people there was listening to our war stories and grabbed me afterwards and said, "Give me a call." He happened to be an attorney, and his sister was an agent for writers, and he convinced me into doing it.
That's great. I'm very glad he did, because it's a great read. And there's this moment in the book, because you pick up the book, and as with anything, you read the title, and then you get into it, and you're just going headlong through this book, and you get to this point where the title comes into play, where this young girl, and I'm not going to give away too much because I think people should read this, go into this, but this young girl gives you this note. And this was the start of the discovery of the College Point Massacre. Now, in reading it, it's sort of an exhilarating moment. You read it because this is big. What was that moment like for you?
That's something that's nearly impossible for me to describe. I describe it in the book as best I can. Anna was in really bad shape when I got to her in the hospital, but we had no idea that there were any murders involved or anything else. All we knew was that we had a girl with a throat cut. And it was a Saturday night, and I tried to be as honest in the book as I could. I wanted to go home that Saturday night. We don't have many off, one every 7 weeks or so. So being that her throat was cut and she couldn't talk, I thought, okay, I could pick this up a day or two from now when she felt a little better. And I turned to her and I said, we'll wait till you feel a little better, and I'll talk to you soon. I turned, and her hand shot out, grabbed my wrist, pulled me to her bed, and she scrawled on a notepad, 6 more dead. That'll send chills up your spine, let me tell you.
Now, the story then progresses to actually going to the location, and I have to tell you, I mean, having gone through civilian police academy and having talked to a lot of officers, I have all the respect in the world for the officers that go into these situations and walk into that not knowing what they're going to encounter. Can you lead us just a little bit through that, walking into that apartment?
Yeah, it was. We didn't know what we had. We had a note, and for all we knew, that she was injured, and maybe a boyfriend had cut her throat, or maybe she got into a fight, or maybe it was gang related. But I spent 20 years in the police department, and you learn that people exaggerate, especially when it comes to crime. Guns are enormous when they're pointed at you. When we recover them, sometimes they're small. And people get beat up and they think it's 10 people, jump them, and it turns out it was 2. For her note, 6 more dead, maybe 6 more people got hurt. We didn't know. We thought there was a party, God knows. But when we got to the apartment, it was a condo up in College Point. And when we got to the door, we knew that something was wrong. Just the loud, blaring music that was coming from inside, which obviously, later on, it was obvious that was left on to stifle the screams. And entering it slowly, not knowing what you're going to find. We didn't know. We were just going to find drunk people laying around, college kids, who knows. And then, one of the first items I saw was a spent shell casing on the floor, and it was just, you can't describe this. It's the adrenaline rush, not in a good way. Your guns are out, you can barely hear because of the music in the apartment, and it was coming from a stereo. There were 2 TVs turned on full. And then the next thing you know is you start seeing blood, and then we find our first body, and we take it from there. And we end up with 6 bodies in the apartment. But even finding the 6 bodies, going through to the very last body, we still didn't know if there was a live body in there who had done this. So I try to describe one of the scenes of, pulling open a shower curtain in the bathroom and, hearing the psycho music in the background.
Yes, yeah.
Because it's exactly what it felt like. You went from one door to the next, one room to the next, and you didn't know what was going to be around the corner.
Well, it's very well described in the book. I really recommend people, for that section alone. I mean, it's well worth a read. But there's so much more in there. Before we move off, have you kept up on the whereabouts of those that were convicted? Are they still in prison? And
they will be in prison forever.
Good. Okay.
Sadly enough, we didn't have a death penalty here in New York at the time, because they would have been the first case, and I guarantee they would have got the death penalty. But I think, if I remember correctly, the sentences for all 3 were 172 minimum to life.
Excellent. Very good. And well deserved. Now the other big case in the book that you describe is a little bit less grim, and that was the Inca gemstone robberies, which ended up with you having to go over to London to testify in this case. Maybe you could just tell us a little bit about that.
The testifying itself, I mean, that was probably the most fun in that case. It was something out of television. Unlike anything I had experienced, and I've testified in probably 1,000 different cases, and I'm very comfortable in a courtroom. But this was just off the wall. I walked into a room full of wigs. It's, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington.
Uh-huh.
It was just odd. I almost, you don't want to laugh, but it was like, are you kidding me? And everyone had a wig on and a robe on, and you had no idea who was who except for the judge who sat, in his elevated station.
Uh-huh.
But very different than New York courts or any court in this nation, where our system is taken from theirs. It's called a stand because that's what you do. You stand. And I got up there and I stood for 5+ hours testifying.
Wow.
And, there were just, people who are in law or have, been in courtrooms before would understand a little more. But it's things in New York, the assistant district attorney here, we go through every little, minute aspect of every case beforehand. There, you don't have a clue what they're going to ask you. So you're winging it. And we're also led here in New York. And by led, I mean they'll ask you, please state your name, rank, and where you work, and you do. And then they say, okay, were you working on this day? And the answer is yes. And then they lead up slowly to the case. And at 9 o'clock, where were you? And then at 10 o'clock, what were you doing? And then what did you say? Here it was, detective, tell us what happened. Mm-hmm. And I, was expecting a New York type of questioning. Well, I was working on this day, March 2nd, 1990, and I got a call for a robbery at a hotel, and I stopped and waited for the next question. And the courtroom was dead silent. And I stood there, and I'm waiting, and he goes, go on. And I said, okay. I responded to the location. I went to the scene, blah, blah, blah. I interviewed people. And I waited again, and again, dead silence, except for the reporters all taking notes. And finally the judge interrupted, and he said, detective, from beginning to end, tell us what happened. And it was kind of a shock to me because we were talking about almost a 2-year-long investigation. And so it took me 5 hours to go through it, beginning to end.
Unbelievable. That was a huge case in the tabloids over there, and there was connections to the royal family, and reading the book, I got a sense that and you talked about it in the note that you had I guess sent off to Scotland Yard that you really were suspicious of these guys pretty much early on and throughout the investigation. Did you feel that you were stymied in some way in following through on that?
Yeah. I go through that in the book a little bit. I really don't. I tried not to disparage too many people, but it was a fraud. It jumped out at us. We had no proof of a fraud, and we weren't positive either way. Anyway, the two perps, Darius Guppy and Benedict Marsh. Darius Guppy came from a long lineage with a good history. His great-grandfather was the explorer who discovered the fish, the guppy. Ben Marsh's father was one of the wealthiest men in England. No reason to suspect fraud here, but it was everything they described to us, and they were brilliant. I mean, Darius Guppy was, I believe, valedictorian at Oxford when he graduated. His best man, he was the best man at Earl Spencer, that's Princess Di's brother, wedding. He knew Princess Di. I mean, that's the type of people we were dealing with. And the New York City Police Department made a decision that we're not going to accuse these people or even upset them in any way, shape, or form. So therefore, don't you dare question them in any way that might make them believe we don't believe their story. So our hands were tied. We did what we could do, and again, we had our suspicions, but we didn't have anything to arrest them. We weren't positive about anything, but problem was we weren't allowed to question them. And I think if we would have ended the case that night. But things as it was. Either way, the case got solved in the long run.
Exactly. In the long run, that's what happened. So now let's take a step back and tell us now a little bit about about your growing up here in Woodhaven. Where did you live in Woodhaven? What school did you go to?
I lived on 80th Street, north of Jamaica Avenue, right opposite 86 Road, in a two-family house my father bought with his brother. I think we moved there in 1964. Went to PS 97, then on to junior high school 210, and over to Lane.
Okay.
And I think I left Woodhaven in 1987, I believe. But spent my entire childhood and all my teen years and a lot of my adulthood there. So I know the area. I still love the area. It's just, and everybody I know who's from the area who's left, we still all talk about the area. I mean, it was just unlike any other place in the world. I mean, personally, I just think it's unlike any other place in the world. There's something about Woodhaven that was special. And I mean, it'll sound crazy. Well, actually, it may not, because I've heard this from a lot of people. All my dreams take place in Woodhaven. I've been out of there forever. And yet every dream I have, I'm in Woodhaven for some reason.
Interesting. That's great.
And I find the same thing. My brother says the same thing. And my best friend who lives in Buffalo, he says the same thing. I mean, he always thinks about Woodhaven. It's just one of those places. It just stuck with us for some reason.
Where were some of the growing up? Where were some of the places you used to hang out with your friends?
Well, as a kid, we weren't the best kids. That's for sure. I'll tell you that much. We were called 97 kids. We hung out in the schoolyard at 97 a lot. Where I met my first girlfriend, had my first beer. Played handball, stayed there from the childhood and through my teen years. As I got older, hung out in Patty Wax for a year or two. I think it became Frankie and Johnny years later, and really went downhill from what I understood. But mostly 97. We hung out in the park a lot as teenagers. We hung out in the golf course by the first pond, or we hung out in the park by 79th Street. But pretty much we were everywhere.
That's great. Those are great times, and Well, listen, I want to thank you for calling in, and again, this really enjoyed the book, and I want to tell everyone out there, if you're looking for a real good book where you get those, like Detective Berke was just saying, the war stories. It's peppered throughout with some stories that really make you kind of, catch your breath, and then other ones that just make you laugh out loud. It's a real good read. Do you think you got another book in you?
Yeah, it's already on the way.
All right.
I just had too many of basically my old squad partners saying, "Why didn't you put this story in there? Why didn't you put that story in there?" So I just started another one. It's just in its beginning stages, but hopefully I'll have that out in a year or so.
Awesome. Well, definitely keep in touch with us and let us know. We really look forward to it, and we look forward to seeing the reactions of everyone as they pick it up and read it.
All right. Thank you so much, Ed.
All right, Detective. Happy New Year.
Bye-bye. Happy New Year.
Bye-bye. That's Detective Raymond Berke, author of Six More Dead. And yeah, absolutely. This is a book to pick up and read. It's a real it's a real quick read. It's 300 plus pages. And you never feel like, oh, I'm never going to finish this. It's one of those books that, from the moment you pick it up, and he starts off with his days, as a cop on the street in some of the worst sections of New York. And the way he puts it is, from there they can't punish him. They can't. It's not like they can, if he messes up, they can punish him and send him to a worse precinct. He's starting there. It's all going to get better from there, and it does. And he takes you through, through a number of changes, and then becoming a detective. And again, like I said, it's framed around these two larger cases, but throughout there are a number of other cases, and like I said earlier, some of them really make you gasp or catch your breath, as you're reading them, the things that our officers have to see, day in, day out. And like you said, never knowing. I mean, here it is a Saturday night, and he's looking to get home, and next thing you know, he is going in an apartment room by room. And when you read that section, room to room, looking for bodies. And not only looking for bodies, but looking for the person that was responsible for it, and then taking you through the actual capture of the men, the questioning, the confessions. It's really well worth reading, and we're really proud that a native of Woodhaven is the author of such a fine book. So thanks again to Detective Berke for calling in. So next up.